Absolute silence swallowed the grand chamber. Supreme Chancellor Valerius gripped the obsidian podium, his reptilian scales draining to a sickly, terrified ash. Millennia of galactic supremacy evaporated in an instant as he stared at the trembling fleet commander and gasped, "You? You attacked Earth? May God have mercy on us." The Galactic Council chamber on Citadel Prime was a marvel of interstellar engineering, a massive amphitheater carved into the hollowed-out core of a dead moon. For 10,000 years, it had been the seat of reason, diplomacy, and law for thousands of starfaring species. Today, it felt like a tomb. At the center of the obsidian floor stood Fleet Commander Zokath of the Xylox hegemony. He was a proud insectoid warrior, his chitinous armor polished to a dark sheen. But right now, his mandibles twitched with nervous energy. He was not here as a conqueror. He was here under tribunal summon, flanked by 4 heavily armed Citadel guards. Above him, elevated on gravity repulsor pods, sat the High Council. The Supreme Chancellor, a venerable reptilian of the Draconis species, stared down at Zokath with a mixture of profound disbelief and brewing panic. "Commander Zokath," the Chancellor's voice boomed through the neural translators of every being in the chamber, the artificial gravity practically humming with tension. "Let us ensure the historical record is entirely accurate. 2 planetary cycles ago, you took the 7th Vanguard Fleet into Sector 4G, an unaligned, unmonitored zone. You bypassed the quarantine beacons, and you engaged. A class, 9 Death World." "They were primitive!" Zokath snapped, his pride flaring, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "A fractured, chaotic species. We monitored their crude radio frequency broadcasts. They are divided into hundreds of petty nation-states, constantly squabbling over resources. They burn liquefied fossils to propel themselves. They launch metal tubes into their own orbit using controlled chemical explosions. They were ripe for subjugation. The hegemony required silicate and liquid H2O. Sol 3 was abundant." The Chancellor closed his middle eye, a gesture of deep, agonizing exasperation. "Detail the initial engagement, Commander. Leave nothing out." Zokath straightened. "We dropped out of faster-than-light transit at the edge of their system, near a gas giant surrounded by rings. We advanced toward the 3rd planet. Our scanners detected primitive orbital infrastructure, a rudimentary communications network, and a few larger habitats. We decided to demonstrate our superiority, a show of force to demand immediate capitulation." The central hololithic projector flared to life, casting a cold blue glow over the chamber. It displayed tactical recordings from Zokath's flagship. The Council watched as the sleek, predatory cruisers of the Xylox fleet drifted into Earth's orbit. "We targeted an orbital manufacturing hub to cripple their infrastructure," Zokath explained. "Our intelligence indicated it was a private commercial venture, entirely unarmed." On the projection, the designation translated into standard galactic text: SpaceX Boeing Orbital Gateway Prime. "We fired a localized plasma lance," Zokath continued. The silent video showed a brilliant beam of violet energy strike the sprawling modular space station. In an instant, the multi-billion-dollar commercial hub shattered, its pressurized modules bursting like overripe fruit, venting oxygen, debris, and the lives of 400 human civilian engineers into the void. "We then transmitted our terms of surrender on all their broadband frequencies," Zokath said, puffing out his chest. "We demanded total planetary compliance within one of their planetary rotations, or we would begin glassing their population centers. We expected mass panic. We expected their leaders to beg." "And what," the Chancellor whispered, his voice dripping with dread, "did they actually do?" "Nothing," Zokath said, his mandibles clicking in confusion. "For exactly 4 minutes and 20 seconds, their entire global communications network went completely dark. No panic, no begging. Just silence." Down on Earth, those 4 minutes were not silent. They were the sound of humanity collectively dropping its differences and picking up a very, very big stick. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, inside the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, General Richard Bowman of the United States Space Command was staring at a massive NORAD screen. The telemetry data from the destroyed SpaceX Gateway had just been confirmed. The private sector was gone. This was now a military operation. General Captain Sarah Jenkins, the lead orbital analyst, said, her voice eerily calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Radar confirms 22 hostile vessels in high Earth orbit. Energy signatures are off the charts. They are transmitting a surrender demand in a mathematically deduced binary code. Bowman didn't hesitate. He picked up the red secure line phone. It connected directly to the Pentagon, where Secretary of Defense David Blackwood and President Jonathan Hayes were already in the Situation Room. Mr. President, Bowman said, we have an unprovoked extraterrestrial first strike. The SpaceX gateway is gone. No survivors. They are demanding surrender. General President Hayes replied, his voice devoid of fear, replaced entirely by a cold industrial fury. Do not let them leave our orbit. Authorization code, Archangel 7. You are green to go hot. Bowman slammed the phone down. Captain Jenkins, route authorization to DARPA command at the Pentagon. Unlock the black projects, bring the Zeus network online, and get me the CEO of Lockheed Martin on a secure line right now. Back in the council chamber, the alien delegates watched the hololithic projection with bated breath. At the 4-minute mark, Zokath whispered, his bravado finally breaking. They responded, but not with words. The hologram in the council chamber shifted. It showed the Xylox fleet hovering arrogantly above the blue and green marble of Earth. Their deflector shields were optimized for energy weapons, plasma, lasers, ion beams, standard galactic warfare. They had entirely underestimated human engineering. We detected thermal blooms across their northern hemisphere, Zokath recounted, his voice now a hollow rasp. We assumed they were launching their primitive chemical rockets, quote, nuclear fusion warheads. Our point defense lasers were primed to swat them out of the sky. We were laughing, Chancellor. We were laughing. Stop the recording, the Chancellor ordered. The hologram froze. He looked at the assembly. Let the record show that the Xylox hegemony failed to read the most basic intelligence briefing on humanity. They are a species that evolved by throwing rocks at predators until the predators died. And over 10,000 years, they never changed their strategy. They just engineered faster, heavier rocks. The Chancellor nodded to the archivist. Resume playback. On the screen, the thermal blooms on Earth's surface weren't ICBMs. They were massive, synchronized bursts of electromagnetic energy. Across the Nevada desert, hidden beneath retractable mesas, Lockheed Martin's highly classified ground-to-orbit railguns, Project Bifrost, had fired. At the exact same time, a network of seemingly dead, defunct satellites officially listed as space junk by Northrop Grumman and the European Space Agency suddenly aligned. The Zeus network. They didn't use energy weapons, Zokath said, his mandibles trembling. They used raw, unshielded kinetics. The council watched in absolute horror as 20-ton cylinders of dense tungsten, accelerated to Mach 35 via electromagnetic rails from the surface, slammed into the Xylox fleet. The alien energy shields, designed to absorb and dissipate heat and plasma, offered zero resistance to solid physical mass, moving at hypervelocity. The first tungsten rod struck Zokath's escort cruiser. It didn't explode. It simply punched through the heavily armored hull like a bullet through wet paper, entering the ventral hull and exiting the dorsal spine in less than a microsecond. The kinetic shockwave inside the ship instantly pulverized the crew and ignited the fusion core. The cruiser silently bloomed into a massive, expanding sphere of debris. 3 of our cruisers were annihilated in the first volley, Zokath said. Before our tactical computers could even register the trajectory of the projectiles, we attempted to retreat to a higher orbit, to regroup. But they did not let you. A representative of the avian corvus species interjected. Her feathers ruffled in fear. No, Zokath whispered. They weaponized their own garbage. The hologram shifted perspective, showing the vast belt of space debris that orbited Earth spent rocket stages, dead satellites, millions of pieces of metal. Captain Sarah Jenkins, down in Cheyenne Mountain, had executed a pre-calculated algorithm designed by DARPA. By detonating a series of precise, small-yield kinetic charges among the debris fields, humanity intentionally triggered a localized Kessler syndrome. They created a cascading wave of shrapnel, moving at orbital velocities, forming a dense, localized hurricane of metal that swept directly into the path of the retreating Xylox fleet. To the Council, it looked like Earth had summoned a sandstorm of razor blades in the vacuum of space. The Xylox ships, their shields, already failing from the railgun strikes, were shredded. Navigation arrays were ripped off. Engine exhausts were clogged with high-velocity shrapnel. Hull breaches erupted across the remaining vessels. "They crippled my fleet using discarded trash," Zokath said, dropping to his knees in the center of the chamber. In 12 minutes, the pride of the hegemony was reduced to drifting hulks. I ordered an immediate, unconditional surrender. The chamber was dead silent. The Supreme Chancellor leaned heavily on his podium. "And did they accept your surrender, Commander?" "A transmission came through," Zokath replied. "Audio only. A human male. He identified himself as Admiral Bowman." Zokath tapped a control on his wrist bracer, playing the raw audio file they had intercepted. The voice of General Bowman echoed through the massive alien chamber, translated seamlessly, but retaining the grim, uncompromising tone of a species pushed too far. "Unknown hostile vessels. This is General Bowman of the United Earth Defense Command. We do not accept your surrender. You fired on civilians. You entered our home. You are now classified as an invasive species. Prepare for boarding actions. May God have mercy on you because we are fresh out." "Boarding actions?" the Corvus representative squawked. "In the middle of an orbital debris storm? That is suicide!" "For us, yes," Zokath said, shivering. "For them, it was Tuesday." The hologram showed the final, most terrifying phase of the human counterattack. From the dark side of the moon, previously hidden by radar-absorbing stealth webbing, several massive, blocky ships emerged. They were ugly, brutalist things, heavily armored, lacking the elegant curves of galactic vessels. They were drop ships, constructed in secret by a coalition of Earth's defense contractors, financed by black budgets that didn't technically exist. The human ships ignored the debris storm, their thick, ablative armor simply absorbing the impacts as they aggressively rammed their docking collars directly into the breached hulls of the Xylox cruisers. "They boarded us," Zokath said, wrapping his arms around his thorax as if reliving the trauma. "We are a warrior race. We expected them to fight with honor, with energy blades and plasma rifles." The Chancellor sighed. "Let me guess. Kinetics again?" "Shotguns," Zokath wept. "They called them shotguns. They didn't even aim. They breached the bulkheads, flooded the corridors with smoke, and used weapons that fired hundreds of tiny metal pellets. Our armor was useless. Our energy shields deflected nothing. They slaughtered my elite guard in seconds. I only survived because they wanted me to deliver a message." Zokath reached into his tunic and produced a primitive, rectangular object, a datapad made of silicon and glass, a ruggedized tablet from Earth. He handed it up to the Citadel guard, who carefully transferred it to the Chancellor's podium. "What is this?" the Chancellor asked, eyeing the device as if it were an explosive. "It contains their navigation data, Chancellor," Zokath said grimly. "They didn't just want to defend their planet. They downloaded our stellar cartography. They know where Citadel Prime is. They know where the hegemony homeworlds are." The Supreme Chancellor's blood ran cold. "Commander Zokath, what exactly was the message they sent with you?" Zokath looked up, his compound eyes reflecting the dim light of the terrified council. They said, "Thanks for the FTL drives. We'll be returning the plasma fire shortly." The silence in the Grand Chamber was so absolute that the hum of the atmospheric recyclers sounded like a roaring engine. The Supreme Chancellor stared at the ruggedized tablet resting on his podium. It was a bulky, rubber-encased Panasonic Toughbook, a relic by galactic standards, yet it felt heavier than a dying star. "Bring forth the chief technologist," the Chancellor ordered, his voice trembling. A multi-limbed cybernetic entity, Chief Technologist Vale of the synth block, glided forward. Vale interfaced with the crude human device using a bundle of optical fibers. "Fascinating," Vael clicked, its vocal synthesizer struggling to process the primitive architecture. "The data matrix is rudimentary, yet layered with aggressive cryptographic traps." "Ah, I have bypassed their firewall. It appears. It appears to be a multimedia presentation." The central hololithic projector flickered, replacing the image of the shattered Xylox fleet with a logo. It was a blue globe, surrounded by a ring of stars, with the letters UNSC Earth etched beneath it. The screen cut to President Jonathan Hayes, sitting behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office. He wasn't wearing military uniform, just a crisp black suit, looking directly into the camera with chilling composure. To the governing body of the wider galaxy, Hayes began, his voice devoid of the theatricality the Council was accustomed to. 48 hours ago, we learned we were not alone in the universe. 47 hours ago, we learned our neighbors are hostile. You murdered 400 unarmed civilians, engineers working for SpaceX and Boeing to better our world. You attacked without provocation. You assumed we were weak. The president leaned forward, interlacing his fingers. We are not a unified people by nature. We have spent 10,000 years fighting each other over land, religion, and resources. We are intimately, deeply familiar with war. It is our greatest shame, and unfortunately for you, our greatest expertise. The video cut to a chaotic montage that made the alien delegates gasp. It wasn't propaganda of peaceful cities. It was raw, unedited footage of humanity's industrial war machine waking up. The council watched footage from the Skunk Works division in Palmdale, California. Human engineers in hazmat suits were aggressively tearing apart the captured Xylox FTL drives with plasma cutters and heavy machinery. They weren't carefully studying the technology. They were cannibalizing it. Your Commander Zokath was kind enough to leave behind several intact faster-than-light propulsion cores, President Hayes' voiceover continued. Our scientists at DARPA, working alongside General Dynamics and Raytheon, have spent the last 2 days reverse engineering them. We don't understand the quantum mechanics of your engines yet. But we don't need to. We just figured out how to turn them on and how to strap them to our ordnance. The chief technologist recoiled from the console. Chancellor! This is madness! FTL drives require decades of calibration to prevent tearing the fabric of space-time. If they are just strapping them to... Quiet! The Chancellor hissed, his 3 eyes locked on the screen. The video shifted to the icy plains of Alaska. A massive, silo-like structure was opening in the permafrost. From the depths, a colossal, brutalist cylinder of solid titanium and depleted uranium was being hoisted into firing position. It had no life support, no crew quarters, no elegant sweeping wings. It was a weapon of mass destruction, retrofitted with a jury-rigged Xylox warp core, bolted crudely to its base. We call it the Pandora Protocol, Hayes stated flatly. We don't need to build a grand armada to reach you. We have FTL-capable missiles now. And we have your coordinates. Commander Zokath surrendered the location of a key Xylox military staging ground, the outpost of Kalen Prime. Commander Zokath, still kneeling on the obsidian floor, let out a wretched wail. No! Kalen Prime is our primary orbital shipyard. 3 million hegemony workers live there. Consider this our one and only warning, President Hayes concluded, his eyes boring into the lens. Stay out of our solar system. Do not approach Earth. Do not test us again. Because the next time a hostile ship enters our orbit, we won't aim for an outpost. We will aim for your homeworlds. The screen went black. Panic erupted in the Grand Chamber. Delegates from 100 worlds began screaming, their neural translators creating a cacophony of terror. Chancellor! An aide shouted over the din, rushing to the podium. Deep space monitoring outposts near Sector 4G are picking up a massive gravitational anomaly. It's a spatial tear. Something is entering slip space. Where is it heading? The Chancellor demanded, slamming his gavel to restore order. The aide looked up, his face drained of blood. Kalen Prime. Kalen Prime was a bustling industrial world, ringed by a colossal, glowing halo of orbital shipyards. Millions of Xylox drones and engineers swarmed over the skeletons of massive dreadnoughts, welding armor plating and installing plasma conduits. It was the heart of the hegemony's military-industrial complex. Admiral Vorak, the overseer of the shipyards, was resting in his command spire when the proximity klaxons began to wail. "Report!" Vorak barked, his mandibles flaring as he rushed to the tactical display. Anomalous slip space rupture detected. Admiral, the sensor technician shrieked. It's not a standard portal. It's unstable. Tearing open, above the shipyards, the vacuum of space distorted violently. Instead of the smooth blue flash of a galactic FTL jump, the fabric of reality seemed to rip apart in a jagged, violent burst of red and violet radiation. From the tear, a human weapon emerged. It was the projectile from Alaska, but it wasn't just a missile. As it exited slipspace, its retrofitted Xylox drive violently detonated, intentionally overloading. The humans hadn't just built an FTL missile. They had weaponized the FTL jump itself. The resulting shockwave didn't carry heat or plasma. It carried pure, unrestrained gravitational force. On the tactical display, Admiral Vorak watched in absolute paralysis as the spatial distortion hit the orbital ring. The human weapon didn't target a specific ship. It targeted the physics of the shipyard. The gravitational shear caught the massive, half-built dreadnoughts and twisted them like tin foil. Tens of thousands of tons of refined titanium alloy were crushed instantly. The automated safety protocols of the Xylox shipyards tried to compensate, but they were designed for energy weapons, not a localized gravity collapse. "Evacuate the ring!" Vorak screamed. "Abandon all stations!" It was too late. Secondary explosions rippled across the halo as fusion reactors on the docked ships lost containment under the gravitational crush. In less than 40 seconds, 50% of the hegemony's naval production capacity was reduced to a spiraling field of burning scrap. Then came the second phase. Back in the council chamber, the live telemetry feed from Kalen Prime was projected for all to see. The delegates watched the destruction of the shipyards with open-mouthed horror. "The planet," Zokath whispered from the floor. "Are they going to glass the planet?" "Negative," the chief technologist reported, its mechanical voice frantic. The human projectile deployed sub-munitions just before the FTL drive detonated. They are entering Kalen Prime's atmosphere. "Nuclear?" the Chancellor asked, dreading the answer. "No, kinetic impactors. But they are targeting isolated, unpopulated zones. The northern polar caps, the barren deserts. Why?" As the Council watched, 20 heavy tungsten rods struck the surface of Kalen Prime. They hit with the force of tactical nukes, but without the radiation, throwing up massive plumes of dust and steam. They didn't hit a single city. They didn't kill a single civilian. "I don't understand," the Corvus delegate whispered. "They destroyed the military shipyards, but spared the planet? Is this a show of mercy?" "Wait," Chief Technologist Fael said. "It's manipulators flying across the console. The impactors, they are transmitting a broadband signal. It's an automated broadcast, looping on all hegemony frequencies." "Play it," the Chancellor ordered. The hum of the chamber was replaced by a synthesized, oddly cheerful human voice, speaking flawless translated Xyloxian. "This area has been liberated by the United Earth Defense Command. Please be advised that the orbital bombardment you just witnessed was performed at exactly 10% of our current payload capacity. We have pinpointed the geographic coordinates of your planetary capital, your water treatment facilities, and your primary agricultural zones. We did not hit them today. If any hegemony vessel crosses the Alpha Centauri perimeter, we will hit them tomorrow. Have a pleasant day." The recording looped, over and over. The Supreme Chancellor sat down heavily in his hover chair. The humans hadn't just delivered a crippling military blow. They had delivered a psychological masterclass. They had demonstrated the ability to completely bypass galactic border defenses, destroy heavily fortified military assets with terrifying ease, and then hold an entire planet hostage with pinpoint accuracy, all while refusing to stoop to the Xylox's level of civilian slaughter. They were saying, "We are monsters, but we are monsters who keep our leashes on. Do not make us take them off." "Chancellor," a terrified diplomatic aide whispered, breaking the stunned silence. "The Xylox hegemony's primary fleet is demanding permission to retaliate. They want to mobilize the entire armada and glass Earth." The Chancellor looked at Commander Zokath, who was currently curled into a trembling ball on the floor, muttering about tungsten and shotguns. He then looked at the frozen image of President Hayes on the human tablet. Deny the hegemony's request, the Chancellor commanded, his voice echoing with absolute authority. Quarantine sector 4G immediately. Erase the coordinates of Earth from all public naval registries. And send an emergency envoy to this United Earth Defense Command. An envoy? Chancellor? The Corvus delegate balked. To those brutes? Yes, the Chancellor replied, closing his eyes. We must beg for a peace treaty before they figure out how to strap their FTL drives to something truly dangerous. Like what? The delegate asked. The Chancellor sighed. Given what we have seen today, knowing them, they will probably find a way to FTL jump an entire asteroid. In the dark, silent void of the Sol system, deep within the asteroid belt, a team of engineers from NASA and Boston Dynamics were currently looking at a 3-mile-wide rock named Ceres, 9, holding clipboards and doing exactly that math. The Citadel envoy ship, the Light of Reason, was a masterpiece of galactic aesthetics. Forged from spun crystal and pearl white composite, it looked less like a vessel of state and more like a soaring bird of prey cast in glass. Inside, Ambassador Xylar of the Lumina, a species known for their profound diplomatic acumen and bioluminescent skin, sat in the opulent observation deck, his glow muted to a pale, anxious blue. He was tasked with delivering the Citadel's generous terms to the Deathworlders. The Council, in their infinite arrogance, still believed they held the upper hand. The treaty Xylar carried offered humanity-restricted FTL travel, limited to a 3-light-year radius around their sun, and heavily monitored trade routes. In exchange, the Council would graciously not glass their planet. Xylar thought it was a suicidal document. He had seen the raw telemetry from Kalen Prime. He knew what these primates were capable of. "Ambassador," his pilot called out, her voice tight with tension, "we are dropping out of slip space at the designated coordinates, the edge of the Sol system, near their 8th planetary body, designated Neptune. Shields to maximum," Xylar ordered, smoothing his ceremonial silk-like robes. "Broadcast the diplomatic cipher on all frequencies. Let us show them the grace of the Citadel." The stars stretched and snapped back into focus as the Light of Reason entered normal space. For exactly 3 seconds, the void was empty. Then, the ship's proximity alarms shrieked a deafening cacophony. The optical sensors didn't register incoming ships. They registered the sudden, terrifying absence of starlight. "Report!" Xylar shouted, his skin flashing a panicked, hazard yellow. "We are surrounded, Ambassador," the pilot stammered, her manipulators shaking violently over the sensor readouts. "They were waiting for us. They were running cold, completely invisible to our thermal and tachyon sweeps." Xylar looked out the viewport. The darkness shifted. The void of space was teeming with massive, jagged silhouettes shedding their active camouflage webbing. They weren't just ships, they were floating fortresses. They lacked the elegant energy shields of the galaxy, relying instead on meters-thick ablative plating. Dozens of heavily armed dreadnoughts drifted into the dim light of the distant sun, their hulls adorned with the painted logos of Earth's military-industrial complex, BAE Systems, Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics. "They have locked onto us," the pilot whispered. "Not with targeting scanners, with localized gravity tethers. We cannot move our engines. We are trapped." Suddenly, the Lumina ship's highly encrypted comms array lit up. A transmission forced its way through, bypassing their supposedly impenetrable quantum firewalls entirely. Right. The predictive algorithms of Palantir Technologies had intercepted the alien software architecture and dismantled it in under 4 seconds. "Citadel vessel, Light of Reason." A gruff human voice echoed over the intercom, synthesized perfectly into the Lumina dialect. "This is Admiral Thomas Wright of the United Earth Defense Command. You are trespassing in restricted space. Cut your main reactor and prepare for forced docking. Any sudden energy spikes will be interpreted as a hostile act, and we will turn your multi-billion credit chandelier into a cloud of highly expensive dust." Xylar's glow faded to a terrified ashen gray. "Comply. Do exactly as he says." 40 minutes later, Ambassador Xylar found himself marching down a stark, unadorned corridor aboard a massive orbital platform designated Aegis Prime. There were no plush cushions here, no soothing ambient music, no flowing water features, just cold steel bulkheads, the heavy hum of industrial air recyclers, and heavily armed guards wearing powered exoskeletons built by Lockheed Martin. He was shoved into a solid iron conference room. Across the heavy metal table sat Secretary of State Cameron Caldwell, a man whose sharply tailored charcoal suit seemed entirely out of place in a military installation, yet perfectly suited to the predatory, calculated smile he wore. Beside him stood Admiral Wright, his arms crossed, looking at the alien envoy as if he were a particularly slow, annoying insect. "Let's skip the pleasantries, Ambassador," Caldwell said, sliding a thick manila folder across the table. "We've translated the data on Commander Zokath's little tablet. We know exactly what the Citadel is. We know your economic dependencies. We know the locations of your core worlds. And we know you're terrified." Xylar straightened his posture, desperately trying to project the ancient authority of the Council. "Secretary Caldwell, Admiral Wright, I represent the combined will of 3,000 star systems. I have come to offer a cessation of hostilities. The Council is willing to forgive your aggressive defense and grant you limited integration into the galactic community." Xylar tapped a command on his datapad, projecting a shimmering hologram of the treaty onto the table. "You will be confined to your home system and its immediate neighbors. You will surrender all reverse-engineered Xylox FTL drives immediately. In return, the hegemony will not launch a full-scale reprisal armada." Caldwell didn't even look at the hologram. He simply stared at Xylar. He let the silence stretch for 10 agonizing seconds. Then, he looked at Admiral Wright and let out a low, humorless chuckle. "Forgive us?" Caldwell leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his eyes locking onto the aliens. "Ambassador Xylar, you seem to fundamentally misunderstand the geopolitical reality of this room. You are not here to dictate the terms of our surrender. You are here to receive the terms of your survival." Xylar blinked his secondary eyelids in genuine confusion. "Secretary, surely this is bravado. You surprised the Xylox outpost, yes. But you are one single planet. We have armadas that blacken the skies of worlds. You cannot possibly fight the entire Citadel." "We don't intend to fight your fleets," Admiral Wright interrupted, his voice like grinding stone. He stepped forward and tapped a command into his own ruggedized console, violently overriding the alien's treaty document. "We intend to remove your board from the game entirely." The hologram shifted. It displayed a highly detailed rotating schematic of a massive, cratered asteroid. "This is Ceres," Caldwell explained casually, as if presenting a quarterly earnings report. "A dwarf planet in our asteroid belt, about 600 miles in diameter. Roughly a third of the mass of our entire asteroid belt." Xylar stared at the spinning rock. "A mining colony? You are threatening us with a rock?" "No," Wright corrected. "An extinction-level event." The hologram zoomed in on the surface of Ceres. Xylar's breath hitched. Swarming over the massive, rocky surface were thousands of robotic drones bearing the Boston Dynamics insignia. They were bolting colossal, retrofitted structures into the stone. They were undeniably Xylox FTL drives, scaled up to monstrous proportions and connected by a massive web of superconducting cables, all powered by dozens of human fusion reactors buried deep within the dwarf planet's core. "We call it the Oppenheimer Gambit," Caldwell said, his voice dropping to a chillingly calm register. "Our theoretical physicists realized that if we could jump a titanium missile across the galaxy, there was no theoretical weight limit to what we could push into slipspace, provided we had enough thrust and localized power. The math was surprisingly simple." Xylar's bioluminescence flared, a blinding, panicked white. You attached a faster-than-light drive network to a planetoid?" 300 FTL drives, actually, Wright specified, wired to detonate their slipspace bubbles simultaneously. Our military AI models have already calculated the trajectory. Ceres is currently locked onto the exact spatial coordinates of Citadel Prime. Caldwell leaned in closer. "If we initiate the sequence, a 600-mile-wide rock will drop out of hyperspace, directly inside your capital's upper atmosphere, at roughly 0.99 the speed of light. The kinetic energy release will be equivalent to a small supernova." The room fell dead silent. Xylar felt a cold, paralyzing dread sink into his bones. The sheer kinetic force of such an impact. It wouldn't just destroy the Citadel. It would shatter the moon it was built upon. The resulting debris, field, and shockwave would annihilate the entire host system, wiping out trillions of lives in a fraction of a second. It was madness. It was a weapon of unparalleled, indiscriminate destruction. You would be committing genocide on an unimaginable scale, Xylar choked out, his voice cracking. You would be monsters! We didn't throw the first punch, Ambassador, Caldwell said, his eyes hard, unyielding, and totally devoid of mercy. You showed up on our doorstep and murdered 400 of our civilians because you wanted to steal our water. You labeled us primitive. You underestimated our capacity for extreme violence. So, here is the new reality. And before you think about preemptively striking Earth to stop the launch, Admiral Wright added, twisting the knife. The launch sequence isn't a button we press. It's a dead man's switch. The Zeus network monitors the life signs and infrastructure of Earth. If our planet is subjected to orbital bombardment, if our command structure falls, or if our population centers are glassed, the signal drops, and Ceres jumps automatically. If we burn Ambassador, the galaxy burns with us. Caldwell pulled back the Citadel Treaty, deleting it from the projector. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a physical document printed on heavy stock paper. He tossed a heavy metal fountain pen beside it. Earth and its surrounding colonies are now a sovereign Tier 1 exclusion zone, Caldwell dictated. Any alien vessel entering a 20 light-year radius without our explicit prior broadcasted permission will be considered an act of war. You will share your medical, agricultural, and material sciences databases with us as reparations for the SpaceX Gateway, and you will formally recognize the United Earth Defense Command as the premier military power in this sector. Xylar looked at the primitive paper, then up at the terrifying humans. His mind raced, calculating odds, looking for a way out. There was none. And if the Council refuses to sign? Xylar whispered. Admiral Wright leaned down, his face inches from the aliens. Then we don't wait for the dead man's switch. We press the manual override, and we turn your Citadel into a very expensive, very dead asteroid belt. Tell your council that humanity doesn't play by their rules. We play to win. Ambassador Xylar's hand trembled violently as he picked up the pen. He didn't need to consult his superiors on Citadel Prime. He didn't need to debate the intricate politics of the hegemony. He knew, with absolute, terrifying certainty, that these beings were not bluffing. They had built a shotgun out of the solar system, and they had the barrel pressed directly to the head of the galaxy. With a slow, defeated sigh, Xylar signed the document. The galaxy had arrogantly kicked a sleeping giant, and as Xylar was escorted back to his ship, looking out at the brutalist steel monsters patrolling the cold void of the Sol system, he knew the Council's 10,000-year reign was over. The era of humanity had just begun. Did humanity go too far? Or was the Oppenheimer Gambit the ultimate flex against an arrogant galaxy? If you loved this epic conclusion of Earth putting the Citadel in its place, smash that like button, share this story with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible sci-fi HFY content. Let us know in the comments what alien tech would you reverse engineer next. Stay tuned for more.